that comes from Greek mythology. You know, when you're standing outside on a cold, clear, crisp winter's day, when suddenly a strong gust of wind blows through and it knocks the last few leaves out of the trees and it cuts through your clothes, it chills you to the bone. Somehow it is even colder than the cold air around you. The Greeks had a name for that wind. They called him Boreas. One day, the young woman, Orithyia, was walking by the banks of the river Ilissus, which flows through Athens, Greece. She disappeared. Probably the most likely explanation for her disappearance is that she simply fell into the river, maybe blown by a gust of the north wind. But they say that Orithyia and Boreas were the parents of Cleopatra, for whom the Egyptian queen was later named, Chiome, the goddess of snow, and the twins, Zetes and Calais. Zetes and Calais sailed with Jason and the Argonauts. When the ship landed on the island of Phineus, they were the ones who chased away the harpies, horrible beasts that had been torturing Phineus. They flew after the harpies and chased them so far away that they never bothered Phineus again. And in exchange for their service, Phineus told the Argonauts how to get past the clashing rocks. They could not have continued without the help of Zetes and Calais. They also say that when King Xerxes sailed toward Athens with 400 ships, the Athenians prayed to Boreas to save them. After all, they reasoned, he was their son-in-law. He was married to an Athenian woman. They prayed to Boreas, and a strong wind blew out of the north that sunk all 400 of the Persian ships. So yes, maybe Orithyia fell into the river that day, but maybe Boreas was flying overhead, and he noticed her. Maybe he came down to talk to her. Hey, baby. How you doing? Orithyia was not impressed. Orithyia, if you were to marry me, I could fly you up into the sky, I could fly you around the world, you could see all the sights. Orithyia, if you were to marry me, you could sleep every night on the softest, downiest bed of clouds. Wait, Orithyia, if you were to marry me, I could carve ice sculptures that look like you to share your beauty with the world. Boreas was being as calm and polite as he could be. But he really wasn't very good at being calm and polite. He was a wind god, a storm god. In fact, the ancient Greeks would try not to sail on the ocean during the winter because the winds that blew out of the north would sink their ships. What Boreas was good at was throwing tantrums. Have any of you ever thrown a tantrum before? Sometimes it feels kind of good to throw a tantrum. Until maybe afterwards, when you have to clean up the mess that you made, or maybe your parents are not very happy with you. Boreas thought it felt good to throw tantrums. In fact, dramatic actions are the grape juice of life. He thought that throwing tantrums felt as good as drinking grape juice. So the first thing that he did was he flew up into the sky. It was a bright, clear day, but there were a few little wisps of cloud. He pulled those clouds together to make one bigger cloud. Then he reached across the sky and he pulled more clouds together and more clouds until he had one great, big, fluffy white cloud. And then he squeezed that cloud until it turned gray. And then he squeezed the cloud and it turned black. Then he squeezed the cloud and snow He squeezed the cloud again, and ice fell out. He squeezed the cloud again, and hailstones pelted the earth. He squeezed the cloud, and lightning shot out of the cloud. Thunder shook the sky. Boreas flew back down to Orithyia. He still had a little wisp of cloud stuck in his beard. Orithyia, I make it rain. Marry me. Do you think she agreed to marry him? No. You guys can do it with me. Boreas was not done. He flew out over the ocean. He tapped the waves and started them rolling. At first they rolled gently, but then the waves got higher and higher until they reached all the way up to the sky. The spray dampened the stars. You could almost hear some of them sizzle out. Meanwhile, the valleys between the waves cut all the way down to the bottom of the ocean. On the sand, you could see little sea creatures skittering to get back into the water. The monsters from the deep had been washed up to the surface, and the shallow dwellers had been sucked down to the bottom of the ocean. All of the creatures were mixed up together. Boreas flew back to Orithyia. He had a squid suckered onto the side of his face. It slowly slid off. I moved the sea, Orithyia. Marry me. Do you think she agreed to marry him? Next, Boreas flew out across the land. As he flew by, he pulled up 100-year-old oak trees and he threw them back into the ground, upside down. He whipped between the mountains, and the wind whistled with a keening lament. He flew back to Orithyia. He had tree bark between his fingernails, and his hair was all tangled from the wind. I am the wind, Orithyia. Marry me. Do you think she married him? No. Next, Boreas flew into the caverns of the earth. He chased out all the dark little things that live deep, deep underground. He filled the earth until it trembled and shook. There were earthquakes. Volcanoes erupted. He flew back to Orithyia. He had one of those dark creatures squished beneath his foot, sticking out between his toes. I move the earth, Orithyia. Marry me. Do you think she agreed to marry him? Well, Boreas was about tantrums out. He had used up all of his tricks. He didn't know what to do next. He flew up into the sky. He turned himself into his godly form. He spread his wings. It blocked out the sun. And then he flew back down to Orithyia. He changed himself back into a man. He fell on his knees. Orithyia, I make it rain. I move the sea. I move the land. I am the wind. But without you, I am nothing. Please, Orithyia, please, will you marry me? Do you think she agreed to marry him this time? Yes. Let's see. All you had to do was ask. So they did get married, Boreas and Orithyia. She flew away to live with him up in the north. They had 4 children, Cleopatra, Chione, Zetes, and Calais. The twins had wings like their father. They weren't born with wings as babies. They looked like ordinary children. But when they grew into young men and their beards came in, first their backs were coated with downy feathers, but soon they grew into full wings. Yes, that day when Orithyia was walking by the river and she disappeared, probably the most likely explanation is that she fell in. But I like to think that she tamed the wind.